Okay, we'll get started then. So we have 7 readers, as far as I know. I think I just checked. A couple more people joined, but I think they were just audience. So I thought maybe we'd go alphabetical by last name. So I'll just read them out so you can prepare yourself. Oh, Kathy Mack's not here yet, I don't think. Heather Brown, Louise Chase, Matthew Clem, Kathy Mack, if she appears, Thomas Mingle, Roger Moore, and Jane Timms. So Heather, if you're ready, you can go anytime.
My goodness, to be first. Yeah, I think the little directive we had is, are you writing anything over the holiday of the pandemic or the pandemic holiday or something like that? So I've been writing something called Moving Notes for a couple of years, and this is one of them. This is called State of the Art. I guess you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you. Yep. I'm going to mute myself now.
What is nicer than receiving an email from Roger Fielding, an Ontario colleague and friend, as I navigate a new year, 2022? In Roger's email, he related how he hailed a taxi one day in Cali, Colombia, and once seated and driving off, the driver asked him to feel under the passenger seat, which Roger did. He extracted a rifle. The driver asked if he knew how to use it. Roger said he did. He related to me and to the driver of the time that the Sterling submachine gun was far more effective than the officer's service revolver he was issued during his military service.
That's worse.
Suddenly, I was again in Bogota, walking out Calais from an apartment which my husband's work assignment provided. Once on the main bustling artery, I would have a tea and then find a familiar grocery for a few items. During my journey, I expected to have my mainstay boots I was wearing polished. As I expected, on the Carrera, the shiner of shoes nodded at me and we exchanged smiles. Neither he nor I shared a common language, but by gesture and words we communicated about the sky, the immediate weather, and the problems of the day. I sat on a public bench outside of a cafe open for business, its accordion-style steel grating rolled up. Crowds passed us by, the well-heeled, the business-type folks exiting from buses. Most of the women wore sequin sneakers, the men leather shoes or boots, the former a shoe polisher's nightmare. The shiner of shoes indicated to me, because sneakers do not require polish. His carved shoebox was exceptionally decorated with religious hardware and small chains, and as instructed, I rested my booted foot upon it while he brushed and shined. Inside of his ornate shoebox were a number of cans and jars, tools of his trade. My red boots were leather, ankle high. He found the correct pace for my boots, but my husband's blue boat shoes waiting on the bench were a problem. He resorted items, lifted wooden shelves out of recesses, fitted shelves back in place, shook his head. The blue was novel. Leave them, he said. Editing was needed. He was a wearer of hats, Che Guevara-styled hat, or one with a famous Parisian club logo in black calligraphy. In Roger's email, he had the exact description of the gun he extracted beneath the passenger seat. I am probably as attracted by hats as Roger was by guns, but the difference is Roger made the note. In either case, our characters we met. In either case, our characters we met are made vital by their surround, by their gesture or talk, by the objects or trade. Roger and I remain a bit outside of the surround of our stories in the moment. The other of our stories seems to be the larger device. Without the other, Would there be a moment or a story? I'm reading again Anne Dillard's Living by Fiction. I'm studying her insights about surface and depth in works of plastic art and in writing. And somehow Annie Dillard has entered into this conversation in my office I am having concurrently with Roger and the shoe polisher. My super furnace, a cautionary heating instrument at best, provides a warm blast. It is not to be ignored in the plain and fine discussion of things as they are. Delving into Dillard's criticism will not last long. Soon I will revert to the writing itself. My lifelong argument, writing is what is important, the thing which must be done or done up. But my need to have some reference to style persists. Once in a while, I try to analyze the state of the art. I may wander to Gallery Connection this week in Fredericton, mask on, and with a writer or artist friend, or solo, examine surfaces and depth. I may come away from the gallery with a measure that affords me a way and a means to get the polish on the boot, or to see once again the street scene, smell or ignore the heavy gasoline and diesel issuing along the Calais. I recall, shortly after stepping outside the grocery, while minding the uneven pavers in Bogota, I assisted with a local Colombian woman, a dear man who had stepped off the curb and fell in one easy and effectual swoop, almost like a bird's wing folding, and who quickly righted when we lent a hand. Surface or depth? Plain or fine language? Description or factual writing? A fresh snow dances on the lawn this day outside my door. My boots wait. Thank you.
That was really wonderful, Heather. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It was fun.
And if I heard correctly, we learned that Roger not only has a mask, he also has a machine gun.
Different Roger.
Yeah.
Okay, next would be Louise Chase. Are you ready, Louise?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thanks.
right.
So I've been experimenting with Japanese haiku and some of the offshoots from the different traditions, and I didn't know whether I was supposed to title it, so it doesn't have a title. And I've got two other pieces after that. So it starts with a haiku and then it moves into a piece of prose. 100-year cedars wrangle page wire fencing, horse without shelter. I am visiting from the city and bring a noisy enamel bucket carrying hulled oats, which spooks the horse when I first arrive. She chortles and snorts before advancing, but then reverses, backs away when I raise the metal pail towards her, spirited by every clang and clank. I notice, like me, the horse is of three minds, fleeing, kicking, negotiating. With so many words, I persuade, using soft assurances. There is no threat. Then again, the great mare approaches, curious to concede, hungry enough to feed. That's that one. The next one is more of a free verse poem. It's called An Earlier History in Language. Not to mention birth order and breached positioning, I want to emphasize the 9 pounds, 7 ounces of pink, wet flesh born into a sanitized late 1950s delivery room where my mother's hands had been tied. And then the last one is a poem called "The Land Has Always Loved Me." The land has always loved me, allowed me to lay sprawled on green grassy bedding, welcomed me to sit firm on metamorphic rock, brooding, or languid in cool shade, reflecting, encouraged me to rise again, stand upright, whether tall before tumultuous winds or weary and hunched as night fell against the horizon. The land has always loved me, absorbed my tears for her own good purpose, sweetened bitterness, soothed hard-heartedness, ever leading to a calmer corridor. The land has always loved me, nourished me with her bountiful beauty, fed palate and preferences until I felt finished, full with food and gratitude, my thirst quenched, my tongue stilled. The land has always loved me, wooed my wild and warped persuasions, sent echoes of mirth and nevermind into the hills, then serenaded me again with morning song, day after day after day. Thank you.
That was great.
Thanks.
Your mother's hands were tied? I'm what does that mean?
Go figure.
Welcome to the 1950s.
Oh my
Before.
dear.
That was very
Wow.
common practice.
Wow. Okay. Oops. Sorry, guys. Feel free to use the chat too, folks, if you want to, before or after people have spoken, to say nice words. And make sure to mute yourself if you're not reading, just in case. Okay, Matthew Clem, are you there, Matthew?
I am here. Thank you.
All right. Let me just put your spotlight on. Just hang on now. There you go. You're up.
Thank you. So to sort of put some context around this, the only writing I did over the last few weeks, so over the holidays, has been for some voiceover work that I've done. So I'm actually going to read from a book I put out about 1.5 years ago. It tells the story of me and 3 friends of mine who did a road trip across the U.S. And this is from later in the book, almost near the end. The book's called The Caravan Chronicles, and I'm going to read a little piece that is about something that happened when we were almost on our way home, just our last major stop. We hit the subway and began our journey downtown. We'd asked Paul several times about where he wanted to go in New York City, and every time he always mentioned that he wanted to see the Ghostbusters Fire Hall and see Central Park. With the park now behind us and time ticking away on our visit to the Big Apple, it was time to head down to 14 North Moore Street in Tribeca. We went into the subway station near Times Square, went downstairs, and waited for the train just like everybody else does. But this particular subway ride would result in one of my fondest memories of New York City of all time and set the song for this trip. Wait, the song? What song? Well, for all of my major road trips over the years, there's always been a song or group of songs that I have associated with it. When I went to Toronto to see Faith No More play for the first time in '95, December by Collective Soul and Longview from Green Day kept coming on the radio. So now I always associate those with that trip. I heard again and again while driving to LA in 1997, the song Canary in a Coal Mine. So I'm reminded of that. So when we set out on our 48 state adventure, I wondered what the song might be. And although I'm an avid music lover and have tastes that span from Burt Bacharach to Carcass, the Beatles are not a band that I've really ever enjoyed or spent much time listening to. So it came as a big surprise for me when one of their songs ended up being associated with a road trip of mine. When we got on the subway, there wasn't any room for me to sit, so I stood and held on to one of the metal poles everyone uses to stay steady. As I waited for the doors to close, I noticed a man across from me with a guitar in his lap. A woman struck up a conversation with him and asked him to play a song. And as the doors closed, he started playing and she immediately said, "Oh, I love that song." At first, I had no idea what song it was, but when he opened his mouth and started singing, I found myself remembering it and began to chime in with it. Initially, I didn't remember all the words, but for some reason, I recalled the lyrics from a TV show I had heard long, long ago. As I was singing with him, the woman who was talking to him before began singing along with her friend. None of us knew each other, but we all just broke out singing together as if we had known each other for years. For the couple of minutes that he played, I forgot where I was, who I was with, and all about the fact that we had just driven from Moncton to San Francisco and back to New York over the last 13 days. As I looked around the train car, there were the faces of strangers watching all of us with big smiles, truly enjoying the impromptu sing-along that had sprung out of a group of strangers meeting on a train. At some point during the song, the guy playing guitar looked at us and made a comment about us sounding like professionals because the harmonies sounded so nice. We all smiled at each other and continued to sing as the subway car bumped along the tracks heading towards Ghostbusters headquarters. By that time, we'd driven about 15,000 kilometers around the US and were winding the trip down as we would be starting our final leg towards home that night. Our visit to New York City was the last of our major stops before we made the 14-hour haul back to Moncton. I stood there hanging on like any other passenger, looked around, and I couldn't stop smiling. And just as quickly as it started, the song was over and the car erupted with applause. When the doors opened and I knew we had to get off, I gave the guitar player a bunch of my American change and apologized to him for the lack of bills. He told me not to worry about it and thanked me for my generosity. I walked off the subway and onto the platform, and we headed upstairs to find the firehouse. For me, the song Blackbird would stick in my head for the rest of the trip home and became the song that defined that trip. In those few minutes of standing on the train, singing to a group of strangers, I realized that I had lost myself in a moment of pure immersion. I'd been in the van with Mark, Ken, and Paul for almost 2 weeks, seeing all of these different places across the entire United States of America. But at that moment, on that train, in that car with that group of people, I wasn't a Canadian traveler visiting New York City. I was a local resident jumping in on what countless others see and experience almost every day they ride the train in a city like that. I wasn't thinking about getting home, the long drive ahead, the countless photos I had taken or the places I had seen, or the memories I had made. I was just a guy on a train taking part in something bigger than any one of us alone. That's it.
I understand your experience about associating a trip with a band, and I'm racking my head to hear about the band. But when we drove through Yellowstone National Park, my son was in the back seat playing a group. I can't remember the name of it, but when I see Yellowstone or think of Wyoming or think of any of those states, that song plays in my head.
Yeah, I associate a lot of memories with music. So like I said in when I wrote about it, it was every time I take one of these trips and there's a song just sticks with me. And so every time I hear the song come up on Spotify or on the radio, my mind goes straight to that memory, whatever it might be.
Next is Kathy. Is she here? Kathy Mack? I don't think she is. I'll read you something that's not 5 minutes, but and I didn't read it either, but I didn't write it either. We're moving and we're selling our house and actually showing it tomorrow. And so, of course, you're doing a lot of decluttering. And I found this book that was my son's grade 7 journal. So in the journal, you probably can't see this. It says, Caleb is great. And so I got to read you this because it's just so funny. Why Caleb is better than Rachel. You don't know Rachel, but I'm sure that it'll be self-explanatory. Shouldn't this be obvious? Statistically, people might think the other way around. This will prove them wrong. First of all, more people in the class like me more than Rachel. Just saying. Second, I'm obviously cooler, not to mention more charismatic, intelligent, and ravishing. Why do I even need to say it? You should think this on the, at the stairs. Let me see. When you think Caleb's better in several traits. Creative, Caleb. Humorous, Caleb. Athletic, I've been pounded by Rachel by whatever sport you could imagine. Soccer, basketball, badminton, hockey, you name it, except one. Bowling. Yes, that sport everybody forgets is a sport. I've never felt so proud the one time we went bowling. I won. I never won against Rachel in a sport ever, except video sports. I think that kids are so competitive sometimes anyway. That was just really funny. Rachel is pretty good at everything. So Miss Rachel, and she's at Dalhousie University right now. Anyway, Thomas Mingle, you're next.
Sure. So my biggest project that I'm working on, and it's probably going to take years to finish, is what I called learning leadership, memories, reflections, and my quest for meaning. So some of you know that I'm working at UNB teaching leadership. So this is why that is in the title. I haven't been writing a lot. I've been mostly doing editing over the holidays, but I'm just starting my timer here to get some sense of where we are. But here it goes. I'm going to start where it all started at the beginning. I was born on January 6, 1958 in Erlangen, West Germany. My birth country at the time was characterized by post-war recovery and unprecedented economic growth. Among other factors, and in spite of the national feeling of optimism and stability, the growing tensions between the global East and West fueled the rearmament in Germany and the global arms race. In the wake of this, German industry and trade also grew at a tremendous rate. We all bear the mark of the place and time of our births. We all wear the scars of our nation's wounds. I thought long and hard about this reflection of a Canadian colleague born in China under Japanese occupation during World War II. Some parts of the mark of the place and time of my birth I've already sketched above and will come back to again and again. The scars of our nation's wounds that I wore did not become as obvious to me until much later. The role the German nation played during the rise and fall of National Socialism and the difficulty the nation had and has in appropriately processing its legacy. The first 2 years in Erlangen were rather unspectacular. My hometown was a city in Bavaria characterized by its mid-sized university and the dominant role of the Siemens Corporation, the employer of my father. I enjoyed happy routines with my parents, moments of bliss with our landlady in her backyard when my mother needed to work or go shopping, magic Easter and Christmas celebrations with my extended family, usually at my grandparents' places in northern Germany. It's a thing, early childhood amnesia. Like most everyone else, I lost most of my memories of the first 3 to 4 years of my life around the time when I entered school in 1964. These first years, however, forged my personal journey fundamentally and defined my basic outlook on life. My mom would be there whenever I cried, whenever I was hungry, whenever I craved for care. My father, on the other hand, would leave in the morning, come back in the late afternoon, and sometimes would be gone for days and weeks in a time, always bringing me some exciting gift from his travels when he came back. Fake snakes from India, a two-stringed fiddle from Sudan, and a bow and arrow from Brazil. Curiosity killed the cat, Grandma told me when she caught me venturing into the dark cellar, opening various jars, smelling and carefully testing what I was tempted by. But I'm cautiously curious, I responded, and we both laughed. I must have been around 5 years old, and this was the first memory of my grandma that I can think of, even though I know from the older photos that she had a strong presence in my early years before my parents moved to Tehran. The acclaimed German poet and writer Karl Koloff is not one of my favorite authors. However, he's the first one I remember reading. He even inspired my first writing as a beginning author. In 1968, we read, discussed, and interpreted one of his recent poems, Gewitterlandschaft, Landscape of Thunderstorms. I have no recollections of these conversations, but the results are still tangible. Under the leadership and editorial guidance of our German language teacher, Gerd Gerhardt, the whole class created a collection of poems inspired by Koloff. This collection was published in 1968 as a set of hectographed and bound chapbooks distributed to every student in class and likely not far beyond. To the best of my knowledge, my poem Evening was the first text I ever published. Mr. Gerhardt's encouragement of our reading and writing certainly stuck with me. When writing a poem one spring evening, I remembered sitting at my desk, looking out the window to a bare field across the dead-end residential road in front of our house. Likely I was chewing on my blue Pelikan fountain pen, trying to create something that would resemble Koloff's reflections on a landscape of thunderstorms. The top of my desk was made from Resopal laminate checkered in green and white. The window in front of my desk was tilted and the see-through white curtain was blowing in the light evening breeze. Like a wind rose offering directions to the evening mood. There, line 1 was ready. The breeze had intensified and I must have heard a light thunder. Line 2 done. I and probably others were ready to go to sleep. Line 3. These were the impressions I put into 3 lines on my first ever poem. To this day, I have a copy of that publication on my shelves. Koloff is one of the many public figures in Germany who had to reconcile their success during Nazi Germany and in many decades of the Federal Republic later. Maybe it did help being identified as a political beginner for his writings from 1940 onwards and partially published in the Nazi weekly journal Das Reich. I was not aware of this at the time as far as I remember, but the question remains and begs further reflections. How apolitical can a public figure be, or anyone except for a hermit? Maybe today Koloff would be challenged to survive the cancel culture movement. Thank you.
That's great, Thomas. Thank you very much. We're zooming right along. Roger, are you ready? All right.
And every valley shall be filled with coal, and the miners will mine, growing old before their time, with pneumoconiosis, a constant companion, And that dark spot on the grey slide of the sidewalk, a mining souvenir coughed up from the depths of lungs that so seldom see the sun and soak themselves in the black dust that clutters, clogs, bends and twists those beautiful young bodies into aging, pipe cleaner shapes, yellowed and inked with nicotine and sorrows buried so deep, 1,000, 2,000 feet down, and often so far out to sea that loved ones knew their loved ones would never see the white handkerchiefs, waved, never in surrender, but in a butterfly prayer, an offering and a blessing that their men would survive the shift and come back to the surface and live again amidst family and friends, and always the fear, the pinched-faced, livid, living fear that such an ending might never be the one on offer, but rather the grimmer end of gas or flame or collapse, with the pit wheels stopped and the sirens blaring and the black crowds gathering, and no canaries, no miners singing in their cages. Change. The wind of change will blow, and change will come, heralded not by brazen trumpets and a roll of drums, but overnight, in stealth and silence. The valleys will lose their coal, the seams will shrink smaller and smaller until even the tiniest child will not find room to kneel at the coalface and sweat in adoration, shovel and pick in hand, crying and praying in praise of the black god. Change will come. The mines will be closed. The miners will go on unemployment. They'll move away to other areas where mines still flourish. For a lifetime spent underground is not that easy to forget, and change is never easy. Whoever said it would be easy? The men in grey suits bring change. They walk and talk and plan the changes they will bring about. The pithead baths will turn into supermarkets. A new trading estate will offer work to the workless who will be changed into worthy workers once again, with course after course of education and retraining. Yes, change will come. Some will pack up and leave, only to return, as they cannot face the face of change, as once they faced the cold face, on their knees all day praying. Some will go overseas, by boat or plane. They need never fear, for Australia is near. America is a siren, singing bedrock songs of welcome and freedom. Canada calls, and many arrive here to face the white face of winter, rather than that merry coat black face of old King Cole. Yes, change will come. You will change. Your children will be born into change, and only your memories will recall life before change, that life everlasting that came before the fall of coal, and your immortality is now a post-lapsarian call to constant change, seculi seculorum, forever and ever, until that final change. Amen. Hotline to God. I called you when I was most alone, called from the sinking soul depths where my innermost being yearned for a moment's release from tears and loneliness. I called you the way the darkest midnight calls for the dawn, that the unlit candle calls for the match, that butterflies and moths call for light and crawl into the candle flame for warmth. I called as the lone dog calls, nose pointed upwards at the uncaring stars that carve our loneliness with their golden words, our horoscopes. And yet our fate, or so they say, is in ourselves, not in our stars. Why, oh why have you forsaken me? Why have you unplugged your phone? Why do you refuse to pick up the receiver and answer my call? Tell me, in what way have I hurt you that you should abandon me and leave me this way, waiting all alone? Why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me here high and dry, waiting for the tide to turn, waiting for your call to come? Where have you gone? Tell me, please, when and what did I do wrong? A phone call. The phone rings, shatters our dreams. A skeletal voice at the other end announces the name of the deceased in ritual words, ending with my condolences. 5 in the morning here, 9 in the morning over there, death at a distance, 3,000 miles and 4 hours between us. Yet the phone call arrives on time, instantaneous. Your father, your mother, her mother, gone. Their absence heralded by the police, a lawyer, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, an anonymous nurse, someone you will never meet. That call can come anytime, while you're out in the car or in the garden digging, or maybe shoveling the snow. And maybe that's how death will come, says Seamus Haney, by telephone. An unexpected call from an unexpected caller. The phone rings and your partner listens and hands over the receiver. It's for you, dear.
Awesome as always, Roger. Thank you. Our last reader, our last registered reader anyway, is Jane Timms. If Jane is ready.
Yes, I've been working actually for several months now on a series of mysteries. There's going to be 5 of them, and they're called urban mysteries. And Hannah is my heroine, and she tends office plants for a living, and she stumbled on a mystery that gets her in trouble, gets her kidnapped. They take her to an old industrial warehouse, and here she finds that her friend Kyle has also been kidnapped. And he's actually feverish from his beating that he's received. And to help him stay warm, Hannah wraps him in her skirt. When I awaken, the air is damp like morning fog. There is a small gap in the siding high up, and I can see a kind of red glow of a sunrise when there's a storm on the way. Monday, a day full of work ahead of me, if I could get out of here. Will anyone miss me? Have enough confidence in my punctuality to call me as missing in action? Nadia at Pebbles Clothing expects me to undertake stage 3 of the Whitefly Wars. Will she look at my matchboxes and wonder why I don't appear? There's not much left of this former office above the industrial space. A rickety chair, a stack of papers with endless rows of figures, and in the corner, a lone pot with a skeleton crew of bent and wilted sansevieria, almost unrecognizable. On the floor in a row are 6 water rings where once other plants grew. Why would they take the others and leave this one? Kyle is sleeping, his breathing regular and his fever gone, if you can believe the wrist on the forehead trick. I ease him out to the hard floor and tuck my skirt around his shoulders. I get us another bottle of water and 2 more protein bars. As I stand on tiptoe to reach the bars, I hear a low whistle. I, who disapprove of cat calls, am not amused, but it must mean Kyle is feeling better. Granny pants, Kyle squawks. Way to go, girl. I shush him and seal the deal by giving him a drink of water. He takes the bottle from my hands, another good sign, and together we share a fancy high protein breakfast of protein bars, Greek yogurt for me, sausages for Kyle. After the protein bars, I do a thorough examination of the room we are in. I climb on an old chair to study the ceiling, rattle the various boards sheathing the walls, and step on every inch of floor. This last has promise since one of the floorboards pops right up into my hand. Unsettling in one way, but it allows me to see into the industrial space below. Looks a long way down. But when the thug brought me in here, I counted the stairs to the room, and we know there are 25 steps. We put our heads together concerning the height of a riser and come up with a drop of 18 feet. With Kyle cheering me on, I work for an hour to pry boards, always in the direction of the stairs. The floor is built on 16-inch centers, wide enough to let either of us through. We talk it out for another hour, how to get down without breaking our necks. One way is for one of us to lower the other through the hole in the floor and let them drop the rest of the way. Another idea is to use the pried up boards to make a ladder of sorts to climb down. Another is to make a braided rope from my skirt and use it to get closer to the floor. I love my skirt, but I love freedom more. We use a nail to start a rend in the cloth, and I teach Kyle how to braid. By lunch, another protein bar and a bottle of water, we have a sturdy rope to hold either of our weights. With Kyle's leather belt to anchor it to the floor joist, it gets us 6 feet closer to the floor. Hardly any drop left at all. For a few reasons, I want Kyle to use his jeans to get even closer, but Kyle says at least one of us should be fully clothed. That's it. With this story over and over again, I reach a little climax, then it falls down. I reach another one, it falls down. And just to say that in the last 2 paragraphs of the thing, there's still a climax, you know. So I've had fun writing them.
That's it for all our registered readers. I was wondering if any of the audience members had anything that they would like to share, because we still have lots of time. If not, we can sign off, but you're welcome to read. You have to get my attention though. Anyone? No? Well, I guess that concludes January open mic night. I'm so glad there's a couple of new members here tonight. Diana is here and Robbie Gunter, I think, is here. So glad to have you. And we'll be doing it again in February, the first week of February. And I'll maybe give a bit more notice of when it's going to be.
Rhonda, before you sign off, since I'm new to the group, if there is a little bit of time, I thought perhaps I would read my Christmas letter so that I introduce myself to the group.
Sure, go ahead, Diana.
Sure, it's okay?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. All right, I have it right here. And I should mention I'm currently working, well, I've been working on and off on 3 books. And one is about dogs and cats that I've had, and another's about weddings. And then I have a more technical one called that has to do with hiring and firing, primarily in the public service, because that's my background. So here goes. Oh my, another year almost over, because this was in December. Methinks the earth is simply spinning faster, because time just can't move this quickly. 2021, a year of inspiration? No. Our 2021 focus has been to downsize, and we've done so with notable success. It was also definitely time for a huge shredding event. As we watched the 20 boxes of documents being dumped into the shredded truck that pulled up alongside our garage, it felt like losing 20 pounds. Since most of the shredded documents were CRA related, it brings to mind a note I received from my good friend and very adept accountant during this year's tax time. She said, unbelievably, one of the slips is for an income of 28 cents with tax taken off of 7 cents. That must be for a nanosecond of work. If so, I am impressed at how efficiently you work. I would, however, recommend that you don't spend it all in one place. You really need to increase your rates. On a totally unrelated but tasty note, entrusting various reusable canning jars to Levita, our friend and neighbor, resulted in several of those jars being returned filled with delicious contents and various other goodies. Obviously, we are of the view that sharing empty reusable jars is a grand idea. Our 2021 wedding season began with a ceremony on January 2nd, on the same day as the first major snowstorm of the year. So I found myself stranded on the north side of the island, but fortunate enough to be rescued by a highly proficient taxi driver. 2 days later, thanks to the kindness of one of our neighbors, our vehicle was retrieved safe and sound. As anticipated, weddings in 2021 were a bit more in demand than 2020, but certainly nothing compared to previous years. The highlight of our wedding season was being interviewed by CBC Radio Canada about how different weddings might look in the future. No doubt smaller, more intimate, and above all, making it possible for guests to attend via some sort of social media. One of our weddings had guests attending from various parts of Canada, as well as the US, the UK, Germany, Ireland, and Australia. Guests in each location had a bottle of bubbly and various goodies to consume, all provided by the wedding couple. William, that's my husband, continued to volunteer on several boards. I'm just going to skip down a bit here. No doubt this is better than William continued to volunteer on several boards to support his amateur radio habit, AKA ham radio. No doubt this is better than some other can't get my tongue around it, more other potential addictions, except for the multitude of towers that have appeared in our yard. No alien ships have landed yet in response to the signals emanating therefrom. Consequently, no offers to follow William Shatner into space. William continues to do all the shopping since the trips into COVID battle zones serve to restock our shelves and fridge. We now refer to these jaunts into town as horizontal replenishment missions, a term gleaned from an old JAG episode that involved dropping supplies onto a ship from a helicopter above. William's interest in technology includes his cell phone, without which he would undoubtedly suffer withdrawal systems. I'm seriously thinking of sending him to social media rehab. As for me, my dog is my life. During a good part of the year, Gizmo and I take a 2-kilometer walk on the road that leads to the beach. But during the winter, that route is not easily accessible. So we walk to the small village of Victoria by the Sea. That's where Gizmo suffered from PTDE, post-traumatic dog encounter. One incident involved a shepherd that ran out from nowhere, to which Gizmo responded somewhat aggressively with, "Come on, make my day." A few days later, we met 2 very, very, very large but friendly Newfoundlands. And as Gizmo looked up and up and up, his response was, "No way, man, the path is yours." By spring, COVID restrictions had lessened and nearby cottagers began to return. Given our experience over the winter, we weren't sure how Gizmo would react to all the new dogs on the shore. But no worries, within a short time, Gizmo had a whole party of friendly, mostly lady dogs to play with on the beach. Every time one of them left for the season, Gizmo would pine for a few days as we walked by the cottages. Be afraid. Gizmo remembers where his canine buddies live. Okay, signs of winter meant that it was time to attend Remembrance Day ceremonies. Each year, William lays a wreath for his dad, my amazing father-in-law. While Gizmo has attended in the past, this year, Gizmo actively participated with the laying of his own wreath for animals in war. That is it. That's it. I cut out a lot because I didn't want to be here forever.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like like to read? Is there anything else anyone has that they might like to read? Speak up if you do. Roger, what are you holding up there? I'm just going to spotlight you so
Nature
everybody
of
can see.
art. What is that?
What is it?
I'm just joking.
Oh,
It's called a book.
What? A what? I have an 8-line poem that won second prize in a stupid contest the other day. You want to hear that?
sure.
All right, one of those, prompt ones, and so write something. Got me 50 stars or something. I don't know. Yeah, I know. It's called Junctions. Railroad tracks and noisy trains, enough coal dirt to clog our brains. Growing up in railroad towns, train yards make for perilous playgrounds. Racing barefoot on scalding rails, flattening pennies and telling tales, moving switches and getting smacked, what we wouldn't give to travel back. I grew up in railroad towns, so. Well, I didn't ever grow up, but railroad towns.
I have a lot of dented pennies.
My father was an engineer. We would get in so much trouble. Apparently that does something to the rails or the tracks or the something. I don't know how it ever happened, but he swore it did. Yeah. I still have some too. Yeah.
Anyone
Never
else?
guess I grew up in a coal mining area, would you?
Yeah, you had a lot of dented everything. Well, I grew up, I remember steam engines, so that's how old I am. My father was the engineer on the last ones that went through New Brunswick, and the junctions were full of coal dirt. And when you fell from your bicycle, you know this, Roger, if you got any kind of injury, when it scabbed up, half the time there was coal still in it. Like I still have a piece in my knee, I swear, because it was everywhere. It was all, the ground was covered in it.
Wow.
There's a Max Boyce song, and every time I cough, I get a mining souvenir.
Here you go. We call them railroad tattoos, but
There you go.
probably in our lungs too.
Wow.
Anyway, it's nice to see you people. It's lonely here in my basement with my 14 cats, but there's always one in view, right? I had to lock 12 of them up or they'd be all over the keyboard. All you'd see was cat bums and stuff. So if anyone wants to adopt a cat, let me know.
How do people feel about how the pandemic has affected your writing, or has it affected it at all?
I'd say for me, I'm a kind of introvert. So I think overall the pandemic has suited me well. It's put me in a corner and let me do what I want to do, which is right. So I would say for me, it's been a positive experience. And I don't know how many people have included, masks and social distancing and that kind of thing in their writing, but I have, because it seems to be part of the world now.
I was just going to ask if it would have affected what you write or how you write. Anna, were you going to say something? You got your hand up there. You have to unmute yourself though.
Okay. I just felt a little guilty because it was the solitude, sort of like Jane. I'm not at all an introvert, but the solitude and just knowing that nobody's going to come and interrupt you. There's not going to be knocks on the door. The phone isn't going to ring like, come, let's do lunch, any of that. And I feel kind of guilty because I'm getting 4 hours at a time, and that you can just get in the zone and stay there and enjoy it. Like, oh, and that's because of some unfortunate event. Really, it's not like I shouldn't wish this would continue, but yeah, so it's up and down about it.
Roger.
Yeah, Julius Caesar invaded Britain in 55 BC. And when he asked about what he thought of Britain, he said, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. And there is my painting, Alpha, Coveni, Covidi, Covici. Oh my God, cubed. Omega, the end.
Oh,
That's brilliant. I love it.
So I took up painting.
Oh, that's a good thing to do. I like to paint. Very contemplative. Well, it's good that, I don't think you should feel guilty about the forced discipline. There's a million other things to occupy us. And at least it's a constructive way to spend that time when we couldn't go anywhere else or do anything else. So that's good. Does anyone else have anything to read or say?
Not to read, Rhonda, but just to say, I think when I'm writing on my novel, and some of it is set in the 40s, 50s, 60s, I just appreciate so much more what people were at that time were experiencing and how they managed and how brave they were, and how little we know about that. And the other thing that was absolutely novel to me, I was gifted a Celtic drum, and I've been strumming. It's really cool. I don't think that would have happened if I had been going out the door more,
How do you strum a drum? Unmute yourself, Heather.
Hi. It's a Celtic drum, so you can strum with your hand, but I guess with the tipper. Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what you called it.
Yeah.
Called the action of it.
Yeah. Well, maybe it isn't. I'm quite new to this, Rhonda. It could be almost anything.
Oh, I don't know.
It's fun.
Dawn says, while I am a hermit for the most part, the imposed seclusion is unhealthy and has a negative impact on my productivity. I can see that too. Yeah, I've drafted 14 chapters of my second book, but it's been slow. Yeah, I can see that. I guess either way, life is a discipline, so whatever you want to do, you need to do what you can do to get it done. Sort of a low grade stress too, right? And I think that part of that comes from not knowing when it's going to be over. Yeah. All right, well. Is that a colorful snowman, Roger?
Yep.
It's beautiful.
I won't
All right,
believe
well,
in global warming until April or May. May be too late.
I hope
Heather's
not.
seen that
Very
before.
nice.
I hope not. I'm still waiting for a publisher. It's been a
Oh,
while.
dear.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was great to talk to you and great to hear your readings. And
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank
we'll
you.
see you again, and we'll see you again in February.
Thanks for doing that.
No problem
Yeah,
at
great
all.
Take
hosting.
care.
Thank you.